Welcome to the richness of our lives. I'm Mary Scott, and this is where we celebrate the wisdom, courage, and stories that shape us. Every 2 weeks, I sit down with entrepreneurs, coaches, and remarkable people who've walked through fire and come out transformed. This isn't just about success. It's about the richness of the human experience. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's dive deep. Welcome to the Richness of Our Lives podcast. I'm your host, Mary Scott. If you're new to this, be sure to watch our previous episodes, around 50 so far. Exciting, different, diverse people. Today is no exception to that. Today I have the pleasure and the privilege and the honour of introducing you to my brother who lives in New Zealand. He is an Emeritus Professor Barry Scott. He's a man whose lifelong dedication has been to science, nature, and a community where he has left an extraordinary mark. In fact, several communities. He's led a distinguished career in molecular science. And now Barry, he says he's retired, but I think he's working as hard, is pouring his energy into conservation, restoring forests, protecting endangered species, even creating a group called Friends of Niue to help tackle invasive plants. It's such an inspiring conversation about purpose, passion, in giving back to the planet that we all love. Hello, Barry.
Morning, Mary. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. It's just lovely. I wasn't sure where to start, but we grew up in New Zealand and I thought we'd start there because from what I remember, and it's a good point to dive in, is you seem to be on a mission for success from a very young age. What's your experience of that?
Goodness, that's a hard question. I was always a conscientious person, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. Went through primary school in Ranfurly, then Mosgiel, and headed off to St Paul's in Dunedin. And all I can remember is I was pretty dedicated and conscientious with my studies, and that kind of carried through when I went to university. And I guess I've always been a person driven to succeed, and quite honestly, not quite sure where that comes from.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's my observation, quite driven. It seems to run in our family a little bit. I've got a bit of that or a lot of that. But I think driven, ducks of school, St. Paul's High School in Dunedin, that says something, how old would you have been there, 17, 18, to be successful at that age. And I like the word dedication because it's like dedicated to a cause, a purpose. And it was like, even though it might have been an unconscious thing, you were dedicated to what you wanted to achieve. And it started in agriculture and then it moved to science. Tell us about how that happened.
Well, during my high school years, I used to work out in the market gardens at Outram, and most kids at that time, this is the 60s, everyone worked in the holidays. There always seemed to be lots of jobs. And so I really enjoyed working on the market garden, working with plants, tomatoes, potatoes, that sort of thing. And as I went through high school, I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. Not much help really from mum and dad because they didn't know. They didn't have anyone who'd gone on to seventh form. And I took advice from career advisors and the like, and they took me down all sorts of avenues. But in the end, I decided with, I guess, the work at Outram that I'd do horticultural science. So I headed off to Lincoln College for a horticultural science degree. And I guess I discovered there for the first time biology, which I never had at high school. I just had physics, chemistry, maths, and English. standard subjects, but it's really quite bizarre when you look back that the school at the time never taught biology. I think there's a bit of a
That is bizarre, isn't it?
feeling that it was a soft science. Not really sure. But anyway, I had 2 years at Lincoln College. It was my first time away from home, a little bit lonely at times. And again, I just worked hard. I can still remember spending Easter of 1968, it
Oh,
was,
wow. You're good with that. Yeah.
working in my room in Ivy College. And that was the year of the Wahine disaster. And here I am, everyone off doing other things, and I'm trying to solve the structure of a protein problem. Pretty crazy, really. But I also used to get out and have some fun and played a little bit of sport. But that was the beginning of it. And then at the end of 69, the head of DSI visited Lincoln and was telling us about jobs at the DSI in Palmerston North over the summer. So I took a job there, worked with a number of people, and ended up working actually with an Egyptian guy who was a scientist there. And we were working with legume plants, little nodules on the roots where bacteria can fix nitrogen. And I thought this was all pretty exciting. And he took me up to Massey and introduced me to some people there and persuaded me that I should change courses and move from Lincoln down to Otago. So I guess that was the start of my science career, and I enrolled for biochemistry. But as time went by, and it wasn't really till I went through, did honours, and then started a PhD, and I was always interested in plant associated work. Couldn't stand working with animals and dissections and all that sort of thing, a little bit squeamish. But Biochem department appointed a geneticist while I was doing my PhD. So I sat through a genetics course and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, particularly all the studies around genes. So I kind of moved deeper and deeper, as it were, from the sort of biochemistry of the cell into the molecular biology of the cell. So that's where it all started.
And did you have, I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to hear your take on it. You had a love of nature and the outdoors, tramping, mount aspiring, all those kind of things. Is that something that you remember from when you were young and that you've kind of nurtured all your life to this day?
Yeah, I mean, living in Mosgiel in the 60s, the old Silver Stream wasn't far away. We'd go out and about there and then on our bikes all around the Tari Plains, or Taiari if we want to pronounce it correctly in Maori. And we'd go off for a whole day, bike up to the Outram Bridge, go fishing all day. And it was a very carefree time. And I loved the bush. And then even some trips with mum and dad when they finally got a car, going through to Milford Sound for the first time, I remember as being pretty amazing. And I just wanted to enjoy that a little bit more. And the opportunity never really arose until I got to university, and especially when I moved from Lincoln down to Dunedin. I remember seeing this great big colour picture of the Dart Valley and advertisement for Easter trips, and I signed up for that and went on this my first tramping trip with a crazy guy called Conway Powell, who I later did a lot of climbing with. And we headed up the Dart River for Easter, and I just thought that was great, and it was kind of a nice balance from the study. So university days really were just hard work during the week, and then we were off tramping or climbing over the weekends. No term assessment in those days. You just had a great time during the year, studying hard, and then final exams. And I just met some terrific friends and just enjoyed getting out and about. And always had a love of plants. So I did a botany paper, which horrified my professor of biochemistry. No one did botany, for goodness sake, if you were studying biochemistry. But that was kind of cool because we had some field trips to the ocean, and I remember going up to the top of the Munkatours with Alan Mark, who's kind of the David Attenborough of New Zealand. I mean, Alan is not in his 90s now. He's an amazing conservation guy. And I guess that was where it's all started. And when you go off climbing and see the alpine plants, you start to get to know their names, and it's always been a sort of great interest of mine.
Yeah, and you went to Mount Kilimanjaro for your 60th, is that right?
Yes, again, I guess it tracks back a little bit. I had a head of department, Tim Brown, a bit of a character, Memo Tim, they used to call him, because he used to write memos all the time to stir up the people in Massey. But Tim said it's really important to mark occasions, and I agree with him. Marking occasions is very important. The trip to Kilimanjaro was to celebrate my 60th. A bit bloody minded about it. But Christine had had some troubles with her Achilles, and she felt she wasn't quite up to it. So I asked Conway Powell to come with us, and the three of us went off, and we spent. Christine got a guide to go up an adjacent mountain, I think called Mount Meadow, and Conway and I, we sort of walked around the side of the mountain of Kilimanjaro for a few days to acclimatize, and then we had all a guide and a whole lot of so-called porters helping us. It's the only way you can do it, and it's good for the local economy. And then you just slowly but surely go up to, I think, the final camp was, let's see, 6,000 meters as summit. So yeah, it's about 4,800 meters, and Conway really didn't acclimatise well, so he had to go down. And I went off with the chief guide at sort of around midnight, and you could see all these lights bobbing up and down as they headed up the mountain. And there's nothing technical about it; it's just the altitude, and I seemed to go fine. And I guess I felt kind of confident I'd be all right, because we'd been in the Andes in 1976 and climbed two 6,000 meter peaks here, and I seemed to acclimatize pretty well. So, and again, it worked when I did Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think it's a powerful thing to mark birthdays, significant events. And I think it's important because what it does is it helps, well, from certainly from my perspective and my experience as a psychotherapist and crazy about personal development, it allows you to get some sense of contribution and what in fact your life amounts to, and significant years like 60, 70, 80, 90. Speaking of David Attenborough, and your other fellow from New Zealand, here they are at significant ages, marking those ages with significant accomplishments. Now, we don't have
Um, yeah,
time. I'm sorry, go on.
I just going to interrupt. Another very significant occasion we marked, and one I think probably worthwhile mentioning at this stage, is Christine and I have been married 50 years, February last year. And so we got the entire family, our three adult children, seven grandchildren, and we all went down to Lake Tiana to celebrate that, because Christine and I always had a close affinity with Fiordland from our tramping days there, sort of stuck under tents and rain and snow and all sorts of lovely and horrible weather. And so we had a week there with the grandkids and our children at the holiday camp at Lake Tiana, and that was really very, very special. And in fact, if there's one thing I've really enjoyed the last 15 years now, I suppose, since, 16 years since our oldest grandchild was born, is just this new generation of kids. And having retired, have a lot more time to go and visit, enjoy time with them. And we get together almost every year, the whole greater family, which is pretty special.
So family's right up there, isn't it? It's a top priority, and you obviously share and celebrate your wins through the years. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, certainly, as time progressed. And I guess it's also fair to say that perhaps, into my eighth decade, goodness, a bit scary. one reflects on these things a lot more, and there's no doubt looking back that there is a cost with that driven, science-driven background. It probably took its toll on Christine and maybe the family a little bit because I was so focused on it. But they were good kids. We still had a lot of good times. But I think, well, you'd have to talk to Christine and the kids, but um, there is a cost sometimes when you drive so hard to succeed in something. Then there's a trade-off with, not in a major way, but in some ways with family life.
Yes, that it's well, your dedication and your commitment was is huge. And my observation is that some might have called you a bit of a stress head. Is that a fair thing to say?
Um, I,
Bit twitchy, a bit.
I certainly get stressed. I get anxious at times. It seems crazy in my 70s to be worrying about the planet and to be worrying about what's happening in America and crazy things like that. I follow American political news quite closely, but it's just me. I have great interest in international events, but you got to manage that stress, of course. And I think probably the most stressful period in my life was when I got promoted or got the new job of Professor of Molecular Genetics at Massey in 85. And I think it's pretty fair if you want to be objective about it. I really didn't have the CV for a position like that at that time, at that young age of 35. And so, but it was all about timing. I just happened to be in that new field, and there were not a lot of candidates at the time. And Sir Neil Waters, who appointed me, took that risk of appointing me. And it was pretty hard going initially, as sort of feeling a little self-conscious of having that position at such a young age. And I think that caused quite a lot of stress and anxiety and I guess fear of failure. And I've given a huge number of talks, as you can imagine now, on everything from GM to public community and science talks, biggest being a talk I gave at a fungal genetics meeting in Asilomar, California in 2007, I think it was, yes, where I gave a plenary address to 700 people. I still remember I always used to take my PhD students along to these meetings, and I could only do that because I had research grants. But one of them, Carla Eaton, she was a bit of a high flyer herself. She said to me, Barry, you're nervous. And I said, of course I'm nervous. I said, I've got to speak to 700 people. But I used to compensate for that by putting a lot of time into preparation, really fine tuning it. And so uh, it would go well. And of course, it did go well. And even just 2 nights ago, I gave a talk here to the Manawatu branch of the Royal Society on gene editing. And I did the same talk essentially back in March this year over in Hawke's Bay. And it was a rather small audience, but it went very well. And it was kind of nice to know that I guess I have all that experience to draw on. I'm a lot more relaxed and can even joke a little bit. And yeah, I got a few laughs, but it went really well, and that's very satisfying.
That's right. One of the things that I'm hearing and noticing is about your discipline. And you talk about in the early days, having the balance, working hard during the week and then going out and being in nature. Where did all that discipline come from? Have you got any ideas about that? Like, incredibly disciplined. And where did it come from? Who taught you that? Have you got any idea? Because we talk about role models, the audience will be curious, about that.
Goodness, I don't have any answers. I mean, I look back at high school and both sixth and seventh form I had was Christian Brothers, Jim Hessian. He was head of the school. He's out of the classroom half the time, so we actually got, pretty poor tutoring if you really want to look back. But I don't know, you just accepted it, and I'd go off to the library and study, and as you know, down to the shed at the back of the house to study to because we lived in a very, very small house in Mosgiel and you needed peace and quiet. I have just no idea where this come from, but just wanted to succeed. And at times I used to feel that I wanted to be in a position where I could control my destiny. I didn't want to, it seems a wee bit arrogant, but I didn't want to be beholden to other people and bossed around. So I don't know, it's just always this drive
Be
to
your own man.
do well.
Was it lonely? Because if just for the audience, just there was a big veggie garden between the house, and at the bottom of the garden was this little shed, and that's what you're talking about. It must have been pretty isolating, was it?
Oh, it was, and there's no doubt. I mean, even right through to when I went off to Lincoln, I had periods of loneliness, and it was quite hard to cope with. Even coming back to Dunedin, I didn't want to go back home because university's pretty intensive, flattered in town. I had friends in that, but yeah, there's always a sort of underlying loneliness, I suppose, that goes with that.
Yes, yes. I suppose when you get to those degrees of high commitment, I mean, discipline seems to be part of what you need to do. I know myself if I'm preparing for something that you have to actually stay the course. You have to, I think you related a story to me when we spoke just a while ago about giving a presentation in Germany and how Christine, your wife, was a bit like, why are you so nervous? You've given this talk 100 times. And you said you talked about your preparation. Like, how important is preparation? And I'm not just talking about a talk, I'm talking about choosing particular careers. How prepared have you been over your life for? Because you've also had some adversity, we'll get back to that. But how prepared have you been over your life, through your life, to be successful?
Well, preparedness is essential, but again, looking back, and I'll make the comparison with my grandkids, it's pretty extraordinary watching grandkids come through giving presentations, even at primary school, using PowerPoint and the like. And, they've given a number of rehearsals to Christine and I, and it's bloody amazing how they can get up and do this and with confidence. And I look back and think, goodness, there's no way I could have stood up and talked to a group, even right through high school, onto university. We just weren't trained.
No.
And so a lot of it's self-taught. And if I look at my science career, and then initially you used overhead projectors and you'd
I
have
remember them.
slides and a carousel and all this kind of stuff. And then it progressed to PowerPoint and other fancy media. But it was hard initially, and I guess just with time and preparation, your confidence grows. And some ways nothing more scary than fronting a big university class where there's lots of smart kids in the classroom. And there's one thing you learn in life, there's a lot of smart people out there, and I had the pleasure of mentoring quite a few of them, probably smarter than me, some of them, but they would often come and ask the very simple questions, which of course I could answer, but it was all about mentoring and guiding and bringing them through and accepting that you had your own limitations, and that's I think pretty important. I sat on the Royal Society Council, Royal Society Te Aparangi, in Wellington for 3 years and watched. I was vice president biological sciences and watched all those people around the table and the president, and it really come home to me that you know, a, being a president of an organization was just a step too far for me, out of my reach. Just didn't have that um, ability to interact with people in an easy, relaxed way. And there were some pretty high achievers, pretty impressive people around that table. And and same in science. You see these immensely impressive people, and you realize sort of where you fit.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because when you sent me your resume, it's the longest resume I've read in a very long time. And I read lots of resumes, and you've led a very, very, very distinguished career and would be highly regarded. I think you're somewhat humble about the list of accolades and acknowledgements that you've received. What is the one acknowledgement that you've received that's meant the most to you?
Probably the top award has to be the Humboldt Research Award from Germany. This is pretty prestigious and has an interesting history to it, this one, because the Dean of College of Science put me up for Distinguished Professor at Massey, but I was declined and I had a
Why?
chat.
Why do they decline someone like you with a career
Well,
like?
this is interesting. There's a lot of high achievers. There's a lot of people better than me, Mary, and sometimes a wee bit of politics in it. But anyway, Robert Anderson, great guy, he gave me a bit of feedback and said, "Well, I'm sorry, Barry, but the Vice Chancellor thought you didn't have enough recognition internationally." And of course, for that application, I had to provide some referees, and you always provide international referees. And one of them was a lady called Regina Carmen, who is being director of the Max Planck Institute in Marburg in microbiology. And of course, after you don't succeed, you should, and I always did, used to let referees know that, sorry, that just didn't work out. And she came up to me at a conference not long after that, and she said, it's terrible. She said, that's just ridiculous. You've got lots of international experience. And she said, I'm going to fix this. She said, I've heard about we have these Humboldt Awards in Germany. And she said, I'm going to nominate you for one. And it was all a bit mysterious to me. I provided her my CV, and she got various referee reports from other German scientists. Humboldt Foundation, by the way, was set up post-war to try and reconnect Germany with the world, and very, very generously funded. They fund PhD students, postdocs, and then there's a special category of research awards. And I still remember sitting in the front row conference in Sevilla in Spain in 2014, I think it was. Yes, it was the European fungal genetics meeting, and Regina come into the room, rushed up and threw her arms around me. Much to my embarrassment, I probably blushed, saying that the application had been successful, and
Oh,
that was huge. It had a huge monetary award attached with it, and the only requirement was that I spend 6 months in Germany carrying out collaborative research with German scientists. So Christine and I went off to Marburg to join Regina and her massive team at the Max Planck Institute in Marburg, and we stayed there in essentially accommodation for postgrad students. It was a wee bit basic. The internet surprisingly was pretty crap. But I used to walk up the hill each day to Max Planck, and Regina just gave me an office, and I didn't have to do any research because I was there for 4 months. It was all about just talking, helping the students. I wrote some papers. But the Humboldt Foundation puts on these various functions for you, and so every research awardee you get to go to Berlin. They have a big function in Berlin once a year, and so in 2015 we went off to Berlin, and they had all these different tours to various places around Berlin. And then on the Saturday evening, there was a special awards function for those that had received research awards. And that was really, really pretty special. And in 2016, I went back for another 2-month period, but this time to Braunschweig, just north of or just south of Hamburg on the line between Frankfurt and Berlin. and worked with a young guy there who I really enjoyed his science. But that particular year, the other thing the foundation does is has a special function for research awardees at the historical town of Bamberg. So Christine and I went there for a lovely occasion, and they choose some of the awardees to give a talk. And for some reason, I got chosen to talk about ryegrass endophytes, and you have to make that intelligible to engineers and people study arts, religion, all sorts of things. So that was quite a challenge, but that went pretty well. But it was just very, very, very special.
Yeah, that's lovely. As I said, I think you're quite a humble guy, and even your narrative then, for some reason they chose me. Um, and honestly, to the audience, if you could see the list that I saw, you can see why Barry would have been chosen as that person. And that's refreshing for me because I see a lot of egoic behavior, and I imagine that the science world is no different. Is that true? Is that your experience? A lot of big egos, or are people just quietly going about achieving lots of cool things?
There certainly are egos, but when I certainly moved from bacterial rhizobium genetics into fungal genetics, I started going to a conference in the States every year, one on the west coast of California every 2 years, and then the other across in New Hampshire. And fungal genetics, I had no training in that background, so I kind of had to pick it up by osmosis and studying. But there was an awesome community, and again, one of the great pleasures for me was to meet all these people, and that's where I initially met Regina Carmen at one of the Gordon conferences in New Hampshire back in about 1994, and also my good friend Jan de Catch from Merck and Co, who I still visit or have visited quite regularly in Charlestown and in Boston. But I know people all around the world now. These are the people that refereed your grants, referee your papers. And so you get to understand how it all works by networking with these people at conferences. And as always, there's some people you get on with, and there's some that you find a bit annoying. But as a community, they were very, very good, and the Asilomar meetings were fantastic. They were over 5 days. It's an old YMCA building at Asilomar Pacific Grove, and it hosts a lot of conferences like this. And it's just intense, there's meetings from early morning to lunchtime. They have a short break, then they have, about a couple of hour break, a lunch, an afternoon session, and then evening sessions as well
Wow.
of posters with beers and that as well. But then on the Saturday night, they always have a big bash. And there was a band who came from Novo Enzymes in Davis. They used to play every year on the Saturday night, and just everyone joined in. It was fantastic. So I've got very fond memories, and I don't connect with a lot of those people anymore, but I've met a huge number of people around the world, and some of them have, become pretty good friends.
Yeah, that's lovely. Let's jump continents and head to Palmerston North Massey, where you were the professor and you had PhD students. Tell me about them. What was that like? You had to get, I heard you mention grants before, and I know you had quite a fight sometime to keep the money flowing, as it were. Tell us about that time in your career.
Well, in 85, the opportunity to get external grants for research was next to impossible. It just didn't exist in New Zealand. There was a Health Research Council that funded medical research, but I wasn't in that space. But then things changed in 92 with changing the science structure in New Zealand, and then some grants become available, and I had some collaborations with scientists across the road. The DSIR got converted into Crown Research Institutes, but I knew a lot of the people involved. Excuse me. Um, so I continued collaborations with them, and just slowly but surely, and actually, collaboration is all important both within New Zealand and externally if you want to succeed with grant writing. And then the Marsden Fund was started probably the mid 90s. And that was a fund for fundamental science. And I initially tried with that unsuccessfully for three times until someone mentored me a little bit on how to succeed. And then over my career, I succeeded in getting 6 Marsden grants. And
Wow, that's great.
yeah, and each was worth about let's see, eight or 900,000 over 3 years. So that was terrific because it gave you money to fund students if they didn't have scholarships. It gave you money to do the research you wanted to do, and also to fund a lot of the trips overseas because Massey did not fund travel that much. So it gave you freedom. And of course, the other big challenge was just getting good students because most students want to study cancer, don't they? Or and things like that. Fungal genetics isn't very interesting.
Where did they come from, Barry, these students?
Oh, most of them were ones I taught. And so, you had to sort of try and I'd often offer summer scholarships for them to work in the lab over summer during the end of their honours year, and then just to see if they liked it, and if they liked it, they could stay on and do a PhD with me. I recruited some from overseas. I had a young Japanese guy in my lab at one stage. Some I inherited. There's one young lady from Thailand who ran into problems with supervision, and I got asked to try and see her through. It was a bit of a nightmare. She was struggling a little bit, but we got there in the end. And that was a big challenge, really, because it's a 3 or 4 year course and or a period of research, and you can't really fail them at the end of that. So you've got to make sure they're up to it. And I started actually first time with a oral defense of the PhD at the end of first year, something the American universities always did, but it wasn't done at Massey, and that was a good preliminary, as it were, to make sure they were up to it. And if they really weren't, and there was some in our department, you would say to them, well, maybe you should just write up for a masterate and leave, because you shouldn't mislead them if for various reasons their heart isn't with it or they're not really that interested in carrying on for a long period of time. But yeah, no, the students were a real delight.
How many did
And
you have, Barry?
what's that?
How many students did you have that you saw through the entire process?
Well, most PhD students have a major and a minor supervisor, but so I was the major supervisor for 25. That is people that did the PhD in the lab. So they were in the lab with me for 3.5, 4 years. So you do
That's
get to know
significant.
them. Yeah, it's a long period of time. And so you've got to have a pretty good relationship with them. And so I was pretty big on mentoring them and also managing them well. For example, all of them had to write a thesis proposal, and every 2 months they had to submit written reports to me. So they got in that sort of swing of writing, whereas other people would wait till the student was finished and then discover that they couldn't write for crap. And that's a nightmare if you have a student who's worked in your lab for 3 or 4 years and then very poor at writing. So you have to start with early all of these things. And I thought it was what I really liked was that first year they're pretty dependent on you, but then as time went on, they made their own discoveries. They become independent, as they should. And by the time the 3, 4 years is up, they were ready to leave. And the first publication they would write was always hard work. But once they'd been through that process, then at least the better ones were then able to write their own publications. And of course, they ended up in all sorts of careers, some of them not science, some are in academia. Got one ex-students at University of Auckland, got one in Fonterra, got one in ag research, got a couple of Japanese who do postdocs with me. They're both at Nagoya University. And another student, he runs a company called Bioteliga in Auckland. Some are teaching,
That's
some are
brilliant.
right out of science, but they've all done amazing things.
I like that, what you're saying about giving them some accountability. And I'm familiar with accountability with certainly my clients and wanting to be successful in business. And I've also got a client, she's not a current client, who's doing a PhD at this point in time. And so I'm going to connect with her and ask her, does she have to submit? I think she's about a year in. What does she submit? And she's got lots to share. But 25 is that an astonishing amount, or is that mostly what people would do of your standing?
Oh, there's probably, you'll see some CVs where supervisors supposedly supervised 100 students.
Wow, how would they do that? That's a lot.
Well, yeah, I'm a wee
I
bit
wonder.
skeptical, quite frankly. There's these are the operators in the world who often in big teams, and there might be a group of them sharing a student, but they all hitchhike, piggyback on
Oh, they
on
claim it
this.
to be theirs.
Oh, and they end up with hundreds of publications. This is the
Oh,
cynical side of me coming out. And there's a lot of that goes on, and you see them coming through for awards, and you sort of say, oh my God, yes, probably deserving, but very inflated CVs and inflated publication lists.
yeah, that's very interesting. Tell me, Barry, you're doing some pretty cool things at the moment. What really makes your heart sing?
Well, certainly, I've thought about this since we initially spoke. Family and grandchildren in particular, just, they watching them and listening to them. We had young Byron's middle boy, young George, down for a week during the last school holidays. And he's such a noisy, bloody crazy kid at home, but he was really good. And we did some cool things, and that was really nice. Yeah, I love spending time with the grandkids. But as you know, since I've retired, environmental work is probably my main passion at the moment. And it must be me, but I've launched into that with the same energy and dedication as I did with my science. And I've kind of left the science to some degree behind. I don't read original research papers much anymore. But I have found that with my background in science, I can quickly read and understand a lot of the conservation work, biosecurity work, and of course, getting the property at Arwina on Aotea Great Barrier was pretty exciting. We purchased that in 2017, and I decided that would be my post academic activity. And so I go there almost every month. I'm on the Aotea Great Barrier Environmental Trust. That's been a whole group of new people, amazing people. And of course, doing conservation work there with some of the seabirds, little blue penguins, grey-faced petrel, trapping rats. There's millions of rats on the island. God, bloody and crazy. One day I hope the island will be rat-free. But I think the other really big thing for me is realizing I can contribute. So I took over editing the biannual environmental newsletter, and I put far too much work into it. But that brings me in touch with all sorts of amazing people who write articles for me. I do editorials. and also got involved in various biosecurity ones. And the big one is the arrival of this horrible seaweed called exotic caulerpa on Great Barrier, and realizing the anxiety and helplessness of the locals. I stepped in and wrote up a big report on that, and analysing basically what had and hadn't been done by MPI who were looking after it, what we knew and didn't know about this seaweed. I learnt a lot, obviously, but it was very much about keeping MPI, as my good colleague, our chair, Kate Waterhouse, dynamic lady, amazing. She'd say, Barry, we've got to keep the bastards' feet in the fire. And she was absolutely right. You know, they were a wee bit devious, not transparent, not releasing reports. And so both of us, we got stuck in, and I wrote reports, and then I ended up on a lot of radio, TV interview for Sunday, a little bit like 60 Minutes. I got interviewed at a coupe beach by the Sunday program, and that was about, a 20-minute program on a Sunday evening. So thousands of people across New Zealand saw that. And it's sort of interesting. You just went in to get my chainsaw sharpened in Palmerston North, and they go, "Oh, I saw you on TV." But I feel like I've really contributed something there. And then I've ended up on an exotic caulerpa advisory group that is led by Mana Whenua, the local iwi that are on the island, Ngāti Rahua, and quite impoverished, pushed historically to the northern end of the island. They haven't settled yet. And many of the iwi associated with Ngāti Rahua live off the island, some even Australia, all around the place. But they whakapapa back to the island, and so I've sort of started to learn a lot about Māori culture. I still can't speak that Te Reo Māori that well, but I know a lot of the words. And just in fact, 3 weeks ago, we had a special strategy weekend, the Friday night at Glenfern Sanctuary on Barrier, and then all day Saturday we had the strategy at Kawa Marae in the far north. And yeah, amazing people. And yeah, it's just a whole new experience.
It's fabulous. We are rapidly running out of time, and I want you to say a little bit about your big adventure and what you've been up to this year in a little Pacific island. Tell us about that.
Well, I guess I'm a bit crazy, really, but I subscribe to New Zealand Geographic, or have done just the last couple of years, has some great articles. And in October last year, there's an issue come out, and there was an article written by Pete McIntyre about the plight of Niue with invasive weeds. And it featured this guy called Haggard, who's head of the environment group there. And Christine and I had been at Lord Howe Island in 23, and we had heard there that there was a group from Sydney used to come up every year called Friends of Lord Howe Island to clear invasive weeds. And so reading that article and thinking about Lord Howe Island, I thought, wow, why don't I form a group called Friends of Niue? And so I chatted to some of my conservation friends on Barry, and they said, that's a great idea. And I've hosted, as is Christine, various groups from Palmerston North, Tramping Club friends on Barrier. So I put the word out and got 12 people together, four from Great Barrier, four of us from Palmerston North, some old tramping friends from Nelson, and a couple of others I didn't know. And it was all self-funded. I bought some electric chainsaws, some oil, power, what do you call them? Chargers for charging the etc. Put it in some boxes, shipped it up to Niue, and oh, sorry, I should back off. When I wrote to Haggard, I got his contact details. See, what do you think about this? He said, "This is fantastic." He said, "You're just what we need." And he said, "I've got just the project for you. There's this tree called African tulip tree that we're trying to eradicate off the island. He said it's still confined to 3 spots, and if you can come up, you could really help us. So we went up there and we stayed at Namakulu cottages, series of cottages. So we're all on site together, hired 3 cars, went and met Haggard on the Tuesday after we arrived, and then on the Wednesday morning, we all rocked up at this site called Vaya Village, an old village that had been abandoned. And of course, they had planted this tree there. It's gorgeous red flowers, so you can
It
see why
is.
they
It's
planted it.
beautiful. It's
Yes,
beautiful.
but it's
Wow.
highly invasive. It grows like a triffid and it spreads all around the place. And they want to try and eradicate it. So we had about a 2-minute health and safety briefing, which I love, what a contrast to health and safety at Massey. And then we got our electric chainsaws out. We paired up or our secateurs, and we paired up in twos with one person with herbicide paste, a gel paste from a container, and one cutting. And then the Nuanes Huggard had a team of 7, so there was 19 of us on the go, cutting, trees this big to just little seedlings. And we just went through and smashed it. And they provided morning tea and lunch. Lunches were huge. We couldn't eat it all. Set up a little marquee to keep out of the sun. It was very hot. So we worked from 8 till 12:30, and that was enough. I was usually pretty stuffed at the end of that. So we did that one site, went back, finished that off, and then we did a little bit of work on a thing called taro vine. It has bloody leaves this big, man, talk about wild plants. And then we went round to the plant research station on the island and cleared another site there, and we discovered a whole lot more plants than Haggard had thought were there. And that must have been on the Friday. And he only wanted us to do the 3 days. And I said, look, Haggard, we've got to do the job properly. We'll come back if it's okay with you next Tuesday.
Of course you do.
So we went back on the Tuesday, finished at the research station, and then shot around to the other side of the island for this other little infestation. But there's a little video that Kim Bannister made. I think I shared the link with you, and he
And
interviewed.
we'll put the link for the audience to see it under this podcast when we go live.
Yeah, that would be good. So Kim interviewed Haggard and I at the start and at the end, and it's quite nice because he and they put on a special dinner for us, and it was just one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. It was really, really good. And of course, we had time to go snorkeling and watch whales and do other things while we're there because we're there for 11 days. So it was sort of a nice balance of some volunteer work and some pleasure.
Oh, it's just lovely. Barry, we're going to have to finish there, and we've probably gone a little bit longer, but I think the audience are going to absolutely love this episode with you. And wow, you're a deep inspiration. I think you've touched many lives, many, many, many lives over a long period of time. I've got a question for you. And just for the audience, I didn't prep him for this, so what would you say to people over 65 who are sitting on recliners and not contributing with all the wisdom they have? What would you say to them today?
Oh, goodness. Try and join a group, get outside and do something. There's so many volunteer opportunities, not just in environmental stuff and all sorts of things. I have friends that go and visit the elderly in hospitals and things like that. Not something that I could do, but do something and do some things that are new, different. It's just so refreshing to be doing new things. It just brings you alive.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it there. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for your time today, because I know you're one busy guy and I appreciate you immensely. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you for joining us on the richness of our lives. If today's conversation stirred something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Connect with me on social media, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are ready to step into your own bold journey, join our vibrant Cheer Squad. We meet weekly for coaching and connection. Until next time, continue to embrace the richness of your life. I'm Mary Scott, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.